Hello and a very, very warm welcome back to this presentation in the series to accompany the book Cyber Attack, Cybercrime, Cyber Warfare and Cyber Complacency. Please take a look at it on Amazon. It's had some cracking reviews. These lectures, as I say, accompany the book, and also accompanying the book are a series of vulnerabilities available on packetstormsecurity.com. And they actually show you the engineering involved with many cyber attacks, particularly DDoS. This is presentation 4 in the series, and it will be concentrating on NTP reflected attacks. Now you will see that there is a great similarity between the NTP reflected attack and the DNS reflected attack, and we will show you and you will see quite clearly the relationship. So we're not going in quite the same detail because they were covered on presentation 3, much of the detail, but this is particularly focused with some of the larger attacks that, as you know, are NTP based. So what exactly is this project about? Well, it's a multimedia project. I've tried to embrace all forms of media, hence the presentation, the book that you see before you, example code for exploits, mitigations, labs, all provided on the internet. And that the reason d'etre for that is twofold. Firstly, in the UK, far more acute than the States, in the UK and to an extent Europe, the risk of cyber attack is great and the exposure is even greater, particularly in the fact that all the money that is invested, all the initiatives, and it is quite diminutive, quite small, as you will see, is either for an offensive force or to protect the status quo. Now that's all well and good. I have no problem, but when the attack comes, we will have little use for government procurement websites or the House of Commons websites. We are exposed, and when the time comes, the people need to be aware that if things go on as they're going, these websites may well be up, but the gas, the electric and the banking system will all be vulnerable and all turned off. And it's not scaremongering, it's about realigning our priorities. Secondly, and a little personally, many books and projects such as this are done for self-adulation, self-promotion. Hopefully that's not true in this case. I recently, and I'll share with you some personal details here, suffered a catastrophic and chronic medical condition, an industrial injury if you like, and the effect, as I say, was profound. And it was based very simply around sepsis, blood poisoning, and I became aware that although 37,000 people a year die from sepsis, which is greater than most cancers, there is almost no support and frighteningly very little awareness amongst not even laymen, but more worryingly amongst the medical profession. So all the net proceeds from the book will go towards the charities that will help people in the future overcome some of these horrific after effects. Now, enough of the heavy stuff. Let's go and do the deep dive on attacks, but we'll start slowly with some basic concepts and strategies. It's also worth mentioning that there's some great coverage in this month's Digital Forensics magazine. It covers all what we'll be doing on this presentation, plus a bit more. So what the heck is a reflection and amplification DDoS attack, and why do we really care? Well, we do because it's incredibly important. Read on. I maintain there are 3 basic ingredients to generating a successful amplified reflected DDoS attack. Follow these basic steps with the right ingredients and you are guaranteed a successful attack tool. The first, and you'll see this quite clearly, is you need an amplification mechanism. That is either a application or a network that will provide you greater output than you provide input. The second ingredient is that application or network needs to be capable of reflection, and that effectively is a redirection. You provide a packet and the results that that packet calls will go to a third party. That is reflection. And lastly, this application or this network or both needs to have little authentication so you can use it simply. Now that's my magic formula. Those criteria you can see can be applied to most of these classes of attack. Now in this slide I will show you that there are 2 basic strategies for amplification. They're easy. If we look at the typical, what I'd call normal types of amplification, it usually works with one agent sending a packet which is amplified, as you can see here represented by a bullhorn. And in this case the multiplication factor is the packet numbers. One packet goes in and multiple packets come out. They tend to be of the same size. So that would be true of the directed broadcast attack or the charge-in type attack. A newer type of attack, and one we're going to look at later, is where the multiplication isn't done by packet numbers. In this attack, the threat agent sends a packet of a set size and a similar number, often slightly more, number of packets emerge from the amplification technique. However, these packets are much bigger. So the amplification occurs in the terms of number of bytes, not necessarily in terms of number of packets. And this is true of the DNS reflected attack. Now, as you'll guess, the other half of an amplified reflected attack is reflection. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the baddest attacker of them all? Reflection simply means you bounce packets off either another server or another application. It's as simple as that. Now here we see a representation of a reflection attack. There are 3 parties involved. We've got the attacking computers, we have the victim computers, the people that are going to be attacked, but also we have a collection of servers here we've called the mirror.com, where the attack is going to be bounced off of. Now in this attack, read reflection as spoofing, because that's the key. Usually the attacks are UDP based because they're easily spoofed, and in this case we're spoofing the source address. We're using a simple payload, just a collection of A's, very similar to the previous payload we saw on the last presentation, that you will remember as just a string of nearly 8Ks of H's. In this case we've used A just to make a change, and when the attack is launched, you'll see that the SADRA, the source IP address, is not 172.16.0.1 as you would expect. Actually, it is 192.168.0.1, the address of victim.com. The destination address is mirror.com, 10.0.0.1. So what effectively happens is that BadBot sends a packet to the reflection server, mirror.com, that when it responds, the packet doesn't go back to BadBot, it goes off to victim. And that's how the reflection occurs. It is simple source address spoofing. Now, putting all this together, let's relate these techniques using NTP as a transport and NTP protocol as a payload for an attack, instead of DNS like we did last time. First, some NTP basics. NTP is the network time protocol, hence NTP, and it's defined by the RFCs that you can see before you. It is used for time synchronization amongst servers, and that's particularly important for us in security, because that's how we get our SIMs and our SIEMs working for security event reporting. It's defined on UDP port 123, easy to remember, and in Unix, which is a proper operating system, we find it implemented by the NTP daemon. Now on Unix there is also a command line client called NTPDC, and this allows you to explore some of the NTP rich functionalities. It is a client server client, so it can be run, or it can extract results from remote machines. Here is the help screen from the client, and I've highlighted the particular command that we're interested in, the monlist command, and that command is shown on the next screen. Now here we see the output of the previously mentioned monlist command. Basically it shows you which servers have connected to you in the past, and it will output the last 600 connections made. And you see, as such, this will qualify as an application that will yield a much greater output that you input. It is a classic amplification command. And so to show you a bit more detail, you can see the remote addresses that are connecting to our NTP server here. You can see the ports that they're connecting on, and you can see the address of our server, the counts, and various other details. So all these combine to make a significant amplification. Many analysts report greater than 700 or 800 times. Now in this slide, and in the next following few slides, you will see how I put it all together so that you can easily see how this can build up into an effective attack. We took the code DNS SP query that we developed for the DNS reflected attack, and we converted it into NT SP query. Now this is basically a UDP query that generates the monlist command, but it does so with a spoofed IP address, so that the attack can be reflected and go to a different destination. Both pieces of code are available at packetstormsecurity.com, and I thoroughly recommend that you download them and adjust them. Part of this analysis is to prove that my three magic ingredients is a correct hypothesis, and you will agree at the end of the next couple of slides that this is true, I'm sure. Now, this packet trace shows the spoofed monolith command that is produced by NTP query. This was run from machine. The attack was run from machine 192.168.0.120, but the command appears to be coming from .192.168.0.1. We've spoofed it. It's going to the NTP server on 192.168.0.121 on port 123, NTP port. It consists of NTP version 2 packet. Here you see the monolith command, which also includes the NTP version. And if you see that 1700.032a, you'll always know that that is an NTP monolith command. The server 121 responds to the spoofed IP address 192.168.0.1 with multiple packets. And here you can see the amplification effect taking place. The list of the dozen or so peers that you saw in the abridged monolith output a few slides ago, you will recall, included the address 192.168.0.1, a spoofed address, a non-existent server, appearing in the monolith output, and here we can see it as one of the many address pairs that will appear in the subsequent packets, and you'll see numerous addresses from that B-class network appearing in the output of the subsequent packets if you try this at home. And that is fundamentally how the NTP amplification attack works. Now, I know you've spotted the similarities already, but I did promise a full compare and contrast between the NTP version of NTP query and the DNS version of this attack, DNS query. They both require address spoofing, and they both rely on applications that will generate more output than the input to generate that output, i.e. what goes in is smaller, considerably smaller than what goes out. I know you're thinking that already. What you will also have noticed is there is no authentication getting in the way. That it's simple to do. Now, authentication wouldn't preclude you from doing it, but it would make the whole process very much more difficult depending on the strength of the encryption or the authentication required. If you look at the output from the command, all NTP query really requires is a very simple monolith command that we covered before. So we have in the code that we covered last week a very quite an elaborate NTP UDP spoofing routine, and for it to become an NTP reflected amplified attack, all we need to do is pass it this string. For DNS SP query, however, we still have a spoofed source address, but we have to pass it a fully qualified DNS name, and this has to be encoded quite complexly. Here you have the 3 denoting the length of that portion of the DNS name, and then www, you have the E that represents loud fat bloke. So that in itself generates quite a level of complexity to put in to the very similar UDP spoofing routine. However, it still relies on minimal authentication for the attack to work. I'm sure you've enjoyed this. I'm sure you can see how all these attacks are related. It's very easy to generate a SNMP equivalent, possibly even a TFTP equivalent, and of course you have the traditional ones that go on small services. You know these already. Now I'm sure you want to know more, so buy the book. It's for charity. Well, congratulations, you've made it through listening to my voice the whole presentation. Give yourself a pat on the back. As I promised, I've given you the URL for the Sepsis Trust and ICU steps. Please donate. As part of this project, I'm not only writing the book, I've written a number of Android apps that hopefully people will find useful and therefore contribute. And also there's these YouTube videos. Sepsis and the aftermath of any prolonged ICU stay is a very, very a traumatic experience, and like I say, many people aren't as stubborn as me, and they literally have to give up work. More people are affected by it than those that than many of the cancers. Many people suffer post-traumatic stress. Over 16% of them suffer really severe post-traumatic stress, and that's just not acceptable in this day and age. So please donate. As I mentioned, there are Android apps out there that will be updated. There are more videos coming, and there's the book. So if you don't think any of that is of value, please just go straight to the Sepsis Trust and donate directly. Thank you very much. That's the book. These are the other items available as part of this program. And that's me. Thank you for your time.